You know that moment when your entire carefully constructed life just implodes? When years of keeping your cards close to your chest, of swallowing your pride, of playing the game, all of it just evaporates because of one stupid mistake? That was me, 3 months ago. One unmuted Zoom call, 47 witnesses, and a text notification from my bank that changed everything. I still remember staring at my screen, watching the chat explode with messages, watching people's faces change, some shocked, some confused, some with this look I'll never forget, like they'd caught me in a lie I didn't even know I was telling. Must be nice, someone typed in the chat, just 3 words that felt like an accusation. And then, my manager's private message popping up, stay on after the call, we need to talk about this. I felt physically sick, like the floor had dropped out from under me. 5 years at that company, and in 30 seconds, I became someone else to all of them. Sorry, I should back up. I'm Viv Morello, I'm 39. Until recently, I was a senior creative strategist at Bluestone Media, where I'd worked my ass off since I was 34. Before that is why I had 6.7 million to wire to anyone in the first place. Actually, before I get into this whole mess, if you're new here, please hit subscribe. Also, like this video, if you've ever had people make assumptions about you that weren't true. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because I'm still trying to figure out if what happened to me is just a toxic Bay Area thing or if it's universal. Okay, so, the money. My mom died when I was 8. Cancer. My dad raised me alone, and he was complicated. Brilliant, but difficult. He was a software engineer back in the late 90s and early 2000s. He worked for 3 different startups that went nowhere. And then, in 2004, he helped found a company called Data Vision. They developed security encryption software for banking systems. I was 21 when he started it, just finishing college. I remember him calling me, so excited, telling me this one was different. This one would work. I'd heard it before, so I just said, "That's great, Dad," and went back to studying for finals. For the next 5 years, I barely saw him. He worked constantly. Our relationship, already strained after years of him being emotionally unavailable while grieving my mom, became just holiday phone calls and occasional emails. Then in 2009, he had a heart attack at his desk. He was 58. At the funeral, all these tech guys in ill-fitting suits kept telling me what a genius he was, how his work had transformed the industry, how the company was being acquired for a substantial sum. I nodded and thanked them while feeling nothing but anger that he'd chosen work over having any real relationship with me. Then his lawyer called. My dad had left me everything: his house, his patents, and his equity in Data Vision. The acquisition went through 3 months later. I was 26 years old and suddenly had 4.2 million in my bank account. I didn't tell a soul. Not my roommates, not my boyfriend, nobody. Because the money felt tainted, like blood money, the payout for growing up without any real parenting. I did 3 things with that money. I paid off my student loans, I bought a modest condo in cash, and I put the rest in diversified investments. Then I got a regular job and lived like a normal person making $45,000 a year. Why? I don't know. Guilt, maybe. Or fear that the money would change me. Or maybe I was punishing my dad by not enjoying his wealth. Therapy has been illuminating on this topic. For years, I lived frugally. I took jobs based on what interested me, not what paid well. I dated people who had no idea I could buy their apartment building if I wanted to. I watched friends struggle with debt and housing costs during the 2008 recession, while sitting on a growing fortune I never touched. By the time I joined Bluestone Media, my investments had grown to nearly $8 million. I still lived in the same condo, still drove a 2012 Honda, still brought lunch from home, still stressed about asking for raises just like everyone else. When people at work complained about money, I nodded sympathetically. When they organized happy hours at dive bars because they were affordable, I went along. When my manager Rowan told me that budget constraints meant my raise would be 2% instead of the 5% I'd earned, I accepted it. The truth is, I was playing a role. The role of normal person with normal financial concerns. And I'd been playing it so long, it didn't even feel like acting anymore. Then my condo building announced it was converting to apartments. I had to move. After weeks of looking, I found this incredible property just outside the city. 12 acres with a main house, a smaller guest house, and a barn that had been converted to a stunning workspace. The moment I saw it, something broke open in me. I suddenly saw a different life, a life where I acknowledged my wealth instead of hiding it, where I started the design studio I'd always dreamed of, rather than helping build someone else's company, where I created a space that could support other women, creatives who needed mentorship and opportunities. The property was $6.5 million. With renovation costs and fees, the wire transfer would be $6.7 million. I made an offer. It was accepted. The bank called while I was in a Monday morning all-hands Zoom meeting to confirm the transfer details. I thought I hit mute. I swear I did. I even did the little hand wave you do when you're talking to someone off camera, but don't want to interrupt the meeting. But I didn't hit mute. For 2 excruciating minutes, 47 colleagues heard me confirm my name, address, and the amount of $6.7 million to be wired from my account. When I realized the meeting was still going, but the chat was blowing up. Did I just hear that right? $6.7 million? Who was that? It was Vivian. Must be nice. How does someone in her position have that kind of money? And there it was, the accusation hidden in the question. How does someone like you have that much money? What did you do to get it? Who are you really? Then came Rowan's private message. Stay on after the call. We need to talk about this. When the meeting ended, my screen emptied until only Rowan remained, his face unreadable. So, he said, leaning forward. That was unexpected. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. Look, Viv, I'm not sure what's going on, but this raises some concerns. Concerns? I finally managed. About what? Well, for one, you've been with us for 5 years, always accepting the compensation we offered without much negotiation. If you're in a position to make multi-million-dollar purchases, it makes me question whether you've been transparent about your situation. The way he said situation made my skin crawl. My personal finances aren't relevant to my work here, I said, finding my voice. I've never misrepresented anything about my qualifications or my commitment. But you've created a certain impression, he continued. The team sees you as one of them. If they find out you've been, well, not who they thought you were, it affects team dynamics. It affects trust. And that's when I realized what was happening. I wasn't being accused of lying. I was being accused of not playing my proper role, of stepping outside the box they'd put me in. I need to understand where this money came from, Rowan pressed. Is there something going on I should know about? Are you involved in some kind of outside business that might represent a conflict of interest? The implication was clear. No woman in my position could legitimately have that kind of money. It must be something shady. Or, I must be working for a competitor. Or, I must be doing something that threatened him and the company. That's not something I'm comfortable discussing, I said, my voice shaking slightly. Well, I'm afraid I need to insist, he replied. As your manager, I have a responsibility to ensure there are no conflicts with your employment here. That's when something inside me snapped. 5 years of being undervalued, of watching men with half my talent get promoted above me, of bringing in clients who loved my work, only to have Rowan take the lead in subsequent meetings. Actually, Rowan, you don't have the right to my personal financial information. It has nothing to do with my work, and frankly, it's none of your business. His face hardened. I'm going to have to escalate this to HR and Diane, he said, referring to our VP. Your attitude is concerning, and given the circumstances, we may need to reevaluate your role here. Do what you need to do, I said and disconnected. I sat there, shaking, as message after message poured in from coworkers. Some supportive, Some obviously fishing for information, some passive-aggressive. Jasmine, who I'd thought was a friend. "Hey girl, didn't know you were secretly loaded. We could have been going to much nicer happy hours, lol." Trey, a junior designer I'd mentored. "I don't understand. If you have money, why did you make such a big deal about fighting for my raise last month?" And then Derek, the executive creative director, who'd passed me over for promotion twice. My office, 3 p.m. No excuses. I closed my laptop and sat in silence. Everything had changed. The careful life I'd constructed was falling apart. And I had no idea what would be left when the dust settled. What I didn't realize then was that the destruction of that life would be the best thing that ever happened to me. And that the real story wasn't about the money at all. It was about what happens when a woman finally stops apologizing for her power. But I didn't know any of that yet. All I knew was that I had 2 hours until I had to face Derek, and no idea what I was going to say when I did. Part 2, I almost didn't go to that meeting with Derek. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, seriously considering just driving away and never coming back. But something in me, maybe pride, maybe anger, maybe just the stubborn part of me that hates being misunderstood, made me walk through those doors. Derek was waiting in his glass-walled office, watching me approach. I could feel eyes following me as I walked across the open floor plan. The whispers. The sudden silences when I got too close. "Close the door," Derek said when I entered. "No hello. No pleasantries." I did, then sat across from him, saying nothing. Derek leaned back in his chair, studying me like I was a problem to solve. "So?" he finally said. "You've been holding out on us." "I don't know what you mean," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Come on, Viv, 6.7 million. That's not exactly chump change. The question is why someone with that kind of capital is working here, in this position, at this salary." The emphasis on this position made my stomach turn. The implication being, why would someone rich settle for being a senior strategist when they could be, what? An executive? A founder? "I like my job," I said simply. Or at least, I did. "See, that's hard to believe," Derek continued. "People like you don't work jobs like this unless they want something specific. Information? Contacts? What's your angle?" "People like me," I repeated, feeling heat rise in my face. "People with resources," he clarified, but we both knew what he meant. "I've worked here for 5 years," I said. "I've brought in key clients. I've mentored junior staff. I've pulled all-nighters to meet impossible deadlines you set. If I had an angle, don't you think I would have played it by now?" Derek shrugged. "Maybe this is the long game. Maybe you're gathering intel for a competitor. Maybe you're planning to poach our clients for whatever venture you're obviously funding." That's when it hit me. He was scared. They all were. In their minds, I'd suddenly transformed from harmless employee to potential threat. "My personal finances have nothing to do with my work here," I stated firmly. "I've never been anything but committed to this company." "Then explain the money," Derek demanded. "Because right now, the uncertainty is disruptive. People are talking. Clients might hear. We need to control the narrative." Control the narrative. As if my life was just another campaign to manage. "No," I said. Derek blinked. "Excuse me? Number, I don't owe you or anyone else an explanation about my personal finances. It has nothing to do with my work performance, which has been exemplary, as my reviews show." His face hardened. "That's not how this works, Viv. When something affects the team, it becomes my business. And right now, you're all anyone can talk about." "That sounds like a management problem," I replied. "Not mine." Derek leaned forward. "Let me be clear. We need transparency. If you can't provide that, we'll have to consider whether this is still the right environment for you." "Are you threatening my job because I have money?" I asked, wanting him to hear how absurd it sounded. "I'm saying your unwillingness to be forthcoming creates concerns about trust," he said smoothly. "And we can't function as a team without trust." I took a deep breath. "Here's what I'll tell you. My money came from a family inheritance. It's completely legitimate. It has nothing to do with Bluestone, our clients, or my work. That's all you need to know." Derek studied me for a long moment. We'll need to put you on administrative leave while HR looks into this. Into what? I asked, incredulous. What policy have I violated? It's just procedure, he said dismissively. 2 weeks, paid. We'll sort this out. As I walked out of his office, the weight of everyone's stares felt suffocating. 5 years of relationships suddenly twisted by assumptions and suspicion. Jasmine caught up to me in the parking lot. Viv, wait. I turned, expecting more awkward questions. I just wanted to say, this is messed up, she said, looking genuinely distressed. The way everyone's treating you. Thanks, I said, not knowing what else to say. But, she hesitated, I don't get it. If you have all this money, why did you live like, you know? Like what? I challenged. Like us, she said simply. Complaining about rent, stressing about bills, acting like you were in the same boat. Her words stung because there was truth in them. I had pretended. I had played a role, not to deceive anyone, but because I'd been deceiving myself. I never lied about who I am, I said carefully. I just didn't share everything. But that's the thing, Jasmine pressed. You shared everything else. Your dating disasters, your dad issues, that time you got food poisoning at the client dinner. But you left out something huge. It makes me wonder what was real. I didn't have a good answer. So I just got in my car and drove home. The next 2 weeks were surreal. I received formal emails from HR requesting information pertinent to potential conflicts of interest. Rowan sent passive-aggressive texts asking if I was ready to have a productive conversation. Former colleagues who I thought were friends went silent, except for Trey. He called me on day 3 of my leave. I'm sorry for my text, he said immediately. It was a stupid reaction. I've been thinking about it, and I get it now. Get what? I asked. Why you fought so hard for my raise, even though money isn't an issue for you, he said. Because it wasn't about the money. It was about what I'm worth, what my work is worth. I felt tears spring to my eyes. Yes, exactly. They're saying weird stuff about you, he continued. Derek told the design team, you're probably planning to start a competitor and steal clients. Rowan implied you might have gotten money through a lawsuit against a previous employer, like you're some kind of professional litigator. I laughed bitterly. Wow! I defended you, Trey said. Then Derek pulled me aside and said, I should be careful who I align myself with during this transition. Transition? I repeated. I think they're building a case to let you go, he said quietly. They're scared of you now. After we hung up, I sat in my condo, the one I'd lived in for years, despite being able to afford much more, and really looked at my life. The IKEA furniture, the careful budget spreadsheets on my laptop, the modest wardrobe. I'd been living in fear of my own power, fear of becoming someone different if I acknowledged my wealth, fear of being judged the way I was being judged now. But the judgment had come anyway. And now I had a choice. Keep apologizing for who I was, or finally step into my full self. The next morning, I called my financial advisor and my lawyer. Then I called Diane, the VP, and requested a meeting. 2 days later, I walked into Bluestone's offices dressed differently than anyone there had ever seen me. No more blend into the background business casual. I wore a perfectly tailored suit that cost more than a month's rent for most of my colleagues. My usual messy bun replaced by a sleek, confident style. Diane was waiting with Derek, Rowan, and someone from HR, whose name I couldn't remember. Thank you for coming in, Viv, Diane began, all corporate politeness. We wanted to discuss. I'm resigning, I interrupted, effective immediately. They exchanged glances. We haven't completed our review, the HR person said. There's a process. I'm not interested in your process, I cut in. You've created a hostile work environment based on assumptions about my personal finances, which are legally none of your business. I've consulted with my attorney, and she agrees I have grounds for a substantial lawsuit. Derek's face flushed. There's no need to make threats. We're just trying to understand the situation. No, you're trying to control a narrative you have no right to, I replied. But it doesn't matter now. I'm done. If this is a negotiation tactic, Rowan started. I laughed. This isn't a negotiation. This is a courtesy. I'm letting you know I won't be back, and I expect my final paycheck and unused vacation time to be processed immediately. What about your clients? Diane asked, suddenly concerned. Your projects? I've prepared transition documents for everything, I said, sliding a folder across the table. Unlike you, I believe in professional integrity. The HR person looked nervous. Just to be clear, you're not planning legal action? That depends, I said, meeting each of their eyes in turn, on what happens next. I walked out feeling lighter than I had in years. Free. But the story doesn't end there. 3 weeks later, after closing on my new property, I incorporated my own design studio. I named it Morello Creative, after my dad's family name. I renovated the barn into a stunning workspace and the guest house into a residence for a rotating creative fellowship program. Then I started making calls. Not to Bluestone's clients I didn't need to steal business, but to talented people I'd met over the years who were undervalued, overlooked, or stuck in toxic environments. People like Trey, who became my first hire. Jasmine texted when she heard. So this was your plan all along? To poach people? No plan, I wrote back. Just recognizing talent when I see it. 6 months in, Morello Creative was thriving. We were small but mighty, producing work that was already winning industry attention. I paid top market rates and offered equity to early team members. I created the environment I'd always wished existed. Then came the call that felt like karma in action. Viv, it's Diane from Bluestone. My heart raced, but I kept my voice neutral. What can I do for you, Diane? I'm calling about a potential collaboration, she said, sounding strained. We've been following Morello's work. It's impressive. Thank you, I said, waiting. The thing is, we've lost some key accounts recently. Clients are saying our creative has gotten stale. I bit back a smile. That sounds challenging. We'd like to discuss bringing Morello in as creative partner on some projects, she continued. A fresh perspective. The irony was delicious. The company that had pushed me out now wanted to hire me back at my rates, on my terms. Send over the details, I said coolly. I'll consider it. And Viv? Diane added. For what it's worth, how things ended. It wasn't handled well. I should have stepped in. It wasn't an apology, not really. But it was an acknowledgement. I did take the project, and I made sure Trey led it, walking into Bluestone's offices as a respected creative director, not a junior designer fighting for scraps. The look on Derek's face when he realized he'd be reporting to Trey for approvals was worth every penny of that $6.7 million. But here's the real revenge. Living completely as myself. No more hiding. No more downplaying. No more apologies. The fellowship program at Morello now hosts 3 women creatives each year, providing housing, stipends, and mentorship. Many are from backgrounds without financial privilege or industry connections. Watching them build their portfolios and careers, with all the support I can provide, heals something in me that broke long before that unmuted Zoom call. Last month, we won Agency of the Year in our category. When I gave the acceptance speech, I spoke openly about my journey, including the money, the shame, and the liberation of finally owning my whole story. Derek was in the audience, having recently been demoted after Bluestone lost their biggest client. Our eyes met briefly as I described creating a company culture built on transparency and genuine value. He looked away first. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone else. It's about building something they can see but can't touch. Something that would have been impossible if they hadn't pushed you away. That Zoom call mishap? It was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to stop hiding, to use my resources instead of apologizing for them, to create something meaningful instead of helping build someone else's dream. So, if you're hiding some part of yourself, whether it's privilege, talent, ambition, or anything else, ask yourself what you're really afraid of, because the judgment will come either way. You might as well be standing in your full power when it does. Oh, and that property I bought? I'm recording this video from the main house right now. Those beautiful bookcases behind me? Custom built. This lighting? Professional setup. This life? Completely, authentically mine. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe. Share in the comments if you've ever had to hide part of yourself to fit in, or if you've experienced that moment when pretending became more painful than the truth. And let me know if you want to hear more stories like this one, because trust me, the journey since that Zoom call has been full of moments I'm finally ready to share. Thanks for listening to my truth. See you in the next video.